Okay, in this Camtasia we'll be looking at how we've improved the character tools here. I'll just start with this character here. Now, one of the most important things with prototyping is to get a character that is immediately connectable with the audience. And this can take several steps and several stages to try and get something that really works. Most of this, of course, happens on paper. But when you actually get into the game engine, you may find that the distortions of the camera, you may need to tweak here and there, or the style needs to be punchier or toned down or what have you. So one of the most powerful things in 3ds Max is the fact that it's based on a stack of modifiers, which works almost like an independent history. And you can go back and change and tweak lower in the stack, and each change is stored all the way up. Now I'll give you an example here. I'll just turn these modifiers off. You can see the elf character has a very flat sort of ears here, and her texturing's a little jagged around here and a little distorted. But this was good enough to start the prototype going. Later, we come back and we fix up the textures. You can see we made her eyebrows much sharper and pointier, and straightened up her hem and corrected around the breast area so it's a nice straight line. And we've stored this as a tweak, so the art director can go in and say, hang on, no, actually, can you change this, turn it back, that's good, that's bad, what have you. Also, we've decided to make the character a little more punchier. Her face was kind of a little dull, and these sleeves weren't working, so we can tweak those up and store that change. Now, because the skin modifier is envelope based, as long as those vertexes stay within the envelope, they're more or less exactly the same. So I can keep tweaking below the surface as much as I like. Okay, so let's have a look at the way we're going to set this character up here. Now, I'm using the skin modifier and I've attached her to a biped. So let's just pull the biped out and have a look at this. Okay, so first off, here is her sword. Now, usually you don't have the character weapon in with the character, but for the prototyping it seemed like a good idea. So just keep everything neat and tidy. We can always take it out later as well. We have here the biped prop, which is connected to the sword, and this allows me to, if I wanted to, use motion capture to quickly add some animation in, and actually motion capture the sword itself. Other than that, the biped is actually pretty standard. Now, that's not going to stay that way for too long. Let's have a look at making some tweaks here. Now, already modified the biped, we've squished out a few areas to make it a little more easy to select. And we're going to make a few improvements. Now, what I've got here is a box that I've just extruded a little face out of, just sitting just there. And I'm going to apply an edit mesh modifier, and I'm going to attach the box to a hand. Now, by using the stack here, I've actually made myself a little handle which allows me to select those hands much easier. So, for example, if the hands are crossed over in front of the body, I just need to click up there and I can quickly grab the hand. I just set this to screen, makes it much easier to see what I'm doing. Now, I could do that manually for everything, but in 3ds Max you can actually drag modifiers from one object to another. And because of the offset position, the way biped's set up, this actually allows me to pretty much do most of the character pieces that I need to access in just a few drags. So now I've got a spine that's very easy to select, even though I've got this large ponytail in the way. And I could actually, let's do figure mode, turn out figure mode for a second there. I can easily select and grab the hands, I can also grab the spine, and I could quickly drag one onto the neck as well, just to make it much easier to select. So, even though I have my mesh there, I've got these little handles, and that's a good start. But we can go a lot further with this. So, for example here, I've taken the elf mesh and split off a copy of the head, which I've optimized a little. I'm just taking a few of the vertexes out. Now what we're going to do here is use the same method that we used to attach the box to completely replace the biped's face. Now there's several ways of doing this. You can actually, for example, copy it directly, copy the object property itself. So if we go to Curve Editor, and just wait for that to come up, and right click on the object, I can actually copy the object type and then paste it onto the biped. However, I might want to twiggle, sort of edit it a bit later. So what I'm going to do is leave this as an edit mesh. So I'll just select the biped head here and apply an edit mesh modifier. and I'm going to attach the fresh head model. So what else I can do here is get rid of the old Frankenstein head, like so, and now I have a biped head which looks exactly like my characters. Now again, I can use the modifier stack here to help me out a little. What I can do is I put a push modifier on this and just tap it a few times. You can see the head of the character expands and contracts along the vertex normals. So if I just tap it a few times and then I unhide my character mesh, you can see the biped now sits just outside the mesh. Now that's really handy as well, because what I can do is take the material and make it a wireframe, which allows it to sit outside like a cage, and maybe a little self-illumination as well. Once I've actually got my character rigged up like this, I can take my character mesh and freeze it so that instead of selecting the mesh, I select only the biped shell around the outside. So to do that, I'd turn Show Frozen in Grey off so I can still see my texture, and then I'll hit Freeze. So now I have this biped head which allows me to manipulate my character, and I have various little pointers to help me out here. So I'm well on my way to setting this character up quite nicely. So let's look at the skin. Hi there. In this series of Camtasias, I'll be running through a number of demos which we've been used recently at the AGDC, the Australian Games Developers Conference, and the focus has been on showing off 3ds Max 6 and Character Studio 4 as not just a content creation tool, but as part of the design tools that you actually use to make and sell the game to publishers and to your team. So in these demos, I'm showing off a few new features that 3ds Max has added that basically make the workflow fluid enough and fast enough that you can actually go the whole hog and make a rapid visual prototype that looks just like a finished game. So I'll just sum up this file here. This is Elven Forge 1, and I'm not expecting this to play back through the Camtasia recorder, but just open the file and have a look at it. You'll see that this looks very much like it was a capture from a game. It's complete down to, well, flashing effects for damage, trails and swords. You can even see the mouse interface. You can see there's a cell shading effect happening on the characters here, and they're non-anti-aliased, and also you can see that there's a, I just get to the right frame, you can see there's a multi-pass blur on all the characters. Now this isn't an expensive multi-pass blur. This is very much doable in games now. If you see games like Prince of Persia using effects like this nowadays. This whole effect here was actually created without a game engine, and it was entirely done in Max. And to give it more authenticity, we actually did this in DirectX 8 and used the screen capture to capture this instead of rendering it. So this is very much exactly what you'll see as a final game result. Now, the things that make this possible are the workflow of the characters and various tricks we can do in the stack, and also the motion mixer in Character Studio, which is phenomenally powerful for trying out a sequence like this. Now normally to do a game prototype like this you'd have to do a lot of keyframing, and in this particular instance it took me about 1 hour to do all the keyframing for this sequence, and then I stitched all the sequences together in Motion Mixer. Now they're not great animations, I have to say, but the point in the visual prototype is just to get ideas onto the table as fast as possible and communicate those to your users. Okay, so let's go into the first demo. Okay, so let's skin this character up a bit. And I've already done half the work on the character, and we're just fixing up a few things here. One of my favourite features in the latest Max is the skin. I'm a bit of a late comer to skin. I was much preferring physique in earlier versions, but skin is just so slick and easy and effortless that I can't help but change over now, so I'm a bit of a skin junkie. So I'll show you exactly how to use skin. There's heaps of features in here, and it's very fast and very simple, so let's have a look at what we can do. So first, let's set up our viewport to actually maximize our efficiency here. What I've done is I've set my colors for selected objects to black. Normally it's white, and it's very easy to do. You just go to Customize User Interface, select Color, and in the Geometry menu, select Selection. Now this is usually white, I've changed it to black in this case. I find it frames the image much easier, and it's easier to see what you're doing. And some people say it helps with contrast. I'm not too sure with that, but generally speaking, I like the black outlines myself. So in this particular case, the black outlines make for a very strong display, because what we're going to be doing is turning off the character texture like so, and we're going to be going into envelope mode. Now you can see what happens in envelope mode is if you've assigned a vertex to an envelope, it goes red, and an unassigned one is blue. Now the fall off between the two goes through the yellow spectrum. So to make this much stronger, we can actually go into properties, and in this case here, turn off shaded, and that gives you a rich red vibrant selection, so you can really see what you're doing. Now on my laptop it's a little slow, and so what it occasionally does is it resets back to shaded view. So what I tend to do is try this Camtasia, run through this demo first, and make sure that that doesn't happen. It's a weird bug. It just goes click and just snaps back in. I don't know why, can't explain it. There you go. Works fine on my other computer, but on my laptop, which seems to be a little slower, you get that happening quite a bit. So that's my word of warning for this demo. So what we've got here is a character, and she's somewhat skinned up and a bit messed up. So we're going to be fixing her up now. So now we've got the viewport set up perfectly, let's have a look at the basic functionality of skin. Skin is non-hierarchical. In other words, that your skeleton doesn't have to be set up and locked down before. Now this comes back to the whole point about prototyping, because you can start working on your characters before you even decide how many bones you're going to use. Whack in the bones, skin up your characters, get them running around, and then if you need to remove fingers or add bones for breathing or pouches or bouncing objects or even breasts, click, 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 you're done. You haven't lost any work whatsoever. So this is one of the cool things and why it's included in this prototyping demo. So let's have a look at how it works. Basically we have, hold on a second, there we go. See, exactly what I mean. See, it's just pop back to shaded view. It's very unusual. Anyway, let's have a look at the way it works. You grab your envelopes simply by clicking on them directly. Now, unlike Physique, you don't have to change modes. You stay within the sub-object envelope and you can do all your work. See, I can actually grab my envelopes cross-sections and my vertexes directly while I'm working in here. So it's all very quick and simple. It's all from the one sub-object. So here I have an envelope. Now the bone itself is actually sitting here. Yet I can move the envelope way away from it, which allows me to do various little tricks. Ultimately speaking though, I want to move it back over here, so just for the point of this demo I shifted it off to one side. Okay, so as you can see it's assigned the vertexes automatically, and I'm just going to turn that darn shade view back off, and then you can see, perfect, you can see exactly what's assigned. Now this is blue, it's outside the radius. Now I could sit and mess around with my envelopes if I was planning to go and edit the mesh below. In this particular case I'm quite happy with the mesh count. Obviously I've got way too many verts up here for a game, so I would actually in real life have to do this. But hey, it's a demo. What we can do here is manually assign them. So I'm going to select my lasso, and I like lasso much more than square mode. It's really good. It's just like drawing. Look, it's just very simple. And what I'm going to do is up the absolute effect in one go and set that to about 0.5, which is about half, which is exactly half in fact, and grab these ones down here and assign those to 1. And that was all very simple. So you can literally do a character in 10 minutes, no problem. Boom, 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 job done. Go on to the next thing. Now that vertex is white because it's 50% on there, but it's not 50% with any other bone. So I have to go up here and select that one again. Just up that a bit more. There we go. Perfect. Okay, so that's the ponytail rigged. Let's look at a few other features. Now, like I was saying earlier, hierarchical, non-hierarchical in the case of skin. In this case here, I've actually fixed up and got these arms done, and I've shifted over here to do, oh dear, I've forgotten my bones. Now what that means is, let's say I was using Physique or other software, I'd have to start again, but not so in skin. let's just go out of skin a second here, and we'll unhide the biped arms, which I've magically got selected already, and let's go back into skin and simply just add them in. And voila! Fantastic. So, job done. Kinda. Let's hide those arms again so they're out of the way so I can see what I'm doing. And we'll go back into skin. And let's have a look at the work I've already done on this side. Now, one of the great inclusions in Max 6 is mirror mode. What that means is I've spent a little bit of time getting that exactly right. So I just go into mirror mode, select my my bone, flip it across. And you can see that now both sides, just like that one, are copied. And that means it saves you actually more than 50% of your time, because normally you would rig one side and get it perfect, then rig the other, and then spend a little bit of time flipping backwards and forwards from side to side, trying to balance it up, making sure that you've got the same sort of vertex assignment on both sides. Look at this, you don't even have to bother spending any time on this. You can take basically anything that's on one side and flip it across with a simple button. Now the way this whole thing works, and the reason it's very flexible, is you can see the orange gizmo, the plane that it's mirroring across. If it finds anything within the threshold setting that you've put here, on either side, it turns one green and the opposite side blue, very much like Character Studio's blue and green on either side. If it can't find anything, it sets it to red. You'll notice on this character that the hands haven't actually gone across, and if I up the threshold, just up it a bit more, a bit more, a bit more, there you go, pop. It's now found them. So in this particular case, I can now copy one side to the other. Now, not only does it copy envelopes, any vertex assignments as well. As you can see, they turn yellow. You can select various amounts of vertexes and paste them across. That's great if you've used the paint tool or manually assign them. So what you can do is simply rig up one side, and rather than actually mirror pasting, you can simply go paste green to blue bones. Boom, everything goes across. Paste green to blue verts. Boom, everything goes across. Very quick, very simple. We'll go back to our skin modifier now. So now we've got an exact mirror on both sides. Now, a few other extra cool things is, take this little complex situation here. You have a rag hanging down here, and you have two legs sitting behind it. Now, usually it's kind of painful to assign this and de-assign this with envelopes, but it's not very hard in skin at all, because I don't even have to add the leg bones. I could add these bones in, rig this, lock it down, then bring these bones in and start weighting those in envelopes. So it's very, very quick, very simple. Okay, so we have our character more or less rigged, and we're just going to go have a look at her moving around. So we're going to unhide the biped, like so. Just grab a little bit of the biped here, and going to turn off figure mode. We've got a run cycle happening here. It's running a little slow on this laptop. Now, when you do any rigging, it's always a good idea to have a run cycle or a loop or something like that, so you can actually play the animation in slow motion and have a good look at the assignments. And it's not just sort of a catch-all. You really want to see them running with the game animations. So in this case here, I'm going to hide the, turn the biped to display as box so I can see exactly what I'm doing. And we're going to set the speed of our playback down to only about a quarter. So now if I hit play, and even with the frame rate with Camtasia running, I can see my assignments and how they're going. And that looks pretty good for now. This character is going to be viewed from a way away, so I don't have to worry about getting it 100% right. Now let's turn our skin back on, our texture skin that is, back on, and Bob's our uncle. That's our first stage of the character done. Now let's hide biped. We've got the whole biped and hide selected, and we have a whole character ready to go now. Now the next stage is we want to add some special effects to her. For example, we may want to do cell shading in the animation, the actual engine itself. However, we don't want to mess around too much here. We want to actually try it out. So in this case here, what I'm going to do is do an edit clone and clone a copy. And that's where I'm going to have to stop Camtasia because I obviously hit a wall. Excuse me a moment. Okay, welcome back. The bug I hit then was I actually made a clone as a copy, where it should actually be a reference for this particular demo. So let's actually do that now. So we're going to go clone, and we're just going to copy as a reference, and we're going to call the thing elf mesh cell. Okay. Now when you're working hard and fast like with a game prototype, you really need to get your naming conventions set up, because you're going to be doing a lot of stuff and throwing it around and not keeping track of it too well. So I do recommend keeping your naming conventions well. So we've got our character, and we actually have two clones sitting in each other. Now with this reference, I'm going to actually put a push modifier on it. Now push allows me to fatten out an object by pushing it along its vertexes. It's very handy actually, so you can make a big fat character, muscular character, or a skinny character. To this mesh I'm going to add a black material, which turns the object black, and I'm going to turn off the vertex colours, which are actually making it white right now. And so there we go, we have a full self-illuminated black material. Now in this particular step we're going to use the normal modifier, and we're going to flip the object inside out. So the effect you get is this sort of like fake cell shading, where one object is always silhouetting the other. Now in the game you probably don't want to actually use this directly, because this causes a lot of overdraw on the characters. You're literally storing twice as much mesh, twice as much animation. It's a real mess. You really don't want to kind of do it that way. But for prototyping purposes, we can have a look and say, hey, you know, cell shading looks kind of good. It might be the way to go. So this is a fake cell shading. You'll see there's no actual cell shadowing going on the character. So no problem at all. That's a really quick way of doing it. I've seen some characters in running around in Quake 3 with this, and it works a treat. It looks very cool. So that's one way of doing it. And let's just take the original character again. Mesh, and we can clone that again, this time as a reference, and this one we're going to call elf mesh flash. Now this is a setup for our particular movie we saw earlier. When a character gets hit, we want to see ways of doing the character recoiling. Now sometimes a recoil animation can kind of get in the way of the game flow, and so an old 80s arcade trick was to make everything flash white or flash red when you get hit. So we're going to try that in our demo and see if it looks any good. It's in the game's design doc, but like anyone pays attention to those things anyway. So we're going to go to the push again. This time we're not going to flip it inside out, we're just going to push this object straight out. And we'll set it to a little bit, just push it out a little bit. Now on this one here we're going to put a self-illuminated white material. Whop that in. There we go. Fantastic. Now with this particular material, what we can do is either animate the opacity of the material in and out to make the character flash, or we'll change the visibility of the object itself. Now what we've got sitting here is a slider, which I already made. I'll just chuck it up here, and then we're going to label this one flash for the damage. Actually, let's be a bit more specific. Let's say elf flash. We may want to flash a few other characters. Remember what I was saying about, you know, the importance of naming convention when you're working fast. Okay, so the value is set to 0, minimum and maximum is 1. So let's take the object, the flash object, and we're going to go into our curve editor. We're going to set up a visibility track for it. So let's just find that we've got the object selected automatically, and all we need to do is tracks and add a visibility track, like so. Now it's simply a case of wiring the two together. So we're going to right click our object, go wire parameters, and select visibility, and link it straight here to our slider and set it to value. Link them both ways and go connect, and we're done. So going into manipulation mode, so I can grab this handle, we move it in and you can see the characters flashing. You see it's a little dotty. That's because I've got the transparency set a little low. We now have the option to have none, simple and best. We'll set it to best. You can see that the character now flashes quite well. Now, one of the nice things is that with all these flash effects and cell shading effects, is I've set them up as references to the original, and they're all using the same skin modifier, so theoretically all I need to do is unhide my figure mode, go out of figure mode, and you can see all the character parts are animating correctly and around each other, and I can simply move my flash model up and down to flash the character. that does look a little goofy being outside the cell shading, so it's just a case of pushing this around. This is sort of visual prototyping method. You just want to keep trying, looking and playing. So it's a good thing to see an artist and a games designer sitting next to each other at some stage. Okay, so let's go on to the next thing. We've kind of set that up nicely, and we just want to finish rigging the characters. So I'm just going to unhide all here, and you'll see the final little touches I've made here. I have a spline, which is going to be the root of my character, and a guide around it. See, I've even written the word hero in that spline. So the idea is that I'll be able to link my biped to this, have the biped run on the spot, and then move this point around to control my character. Also, when I rotate this, I may want to rotate back to 0, so I've actually put a guide here which is frozen, and that allows me to see exactly how far my character's rotated. And I've also put a shadow object here, which is simply just a spline with a UV map on, and that easily allows me to throw down a shadow on flat floors, just to try it out, see if a little grounding shadow. So there we go, that's the character all rigged up and ready to go. Okay, so we've done the character now, we're going to move on to doing the background. Now, I've already made a couple of textures and thrown them down on some surfaces, and made one or two objects to go around. Now, in this particular thing, we don't want to spend too much time. We just want to try and work out how the terrain's going to work and how the lighting system's going to work. So in this particular case, I've set up a tile, which is already set up ready for vertex painting. And it's not overly complex. I've simply got a displacement map running in the middle here, which is set to luminance center, and I'm using vertex color as my setting, and vertex color channel down here. Now the vertex paint below here, and we'll just show the Max 6 vertex paint, which is very cool. This is all set to paint on vertex color channel, and the ones above, which I'll just turn on now, as you can see it drops shadows and lighting into the scene. They're set to map channel 2, so you can work on various map channels simultaneously. Now these two are keyed into the displace. So we have the base, which is actually mid-grey, 1 to 128 grey, which keys into the luminance center of 0.5, which means that it's neither up nor down. And it means that any vertex I paint black will go down, and any I paint white will go up. So I have a second channel here where I can start painting. So let's just start doing this. I need to upsize my brush a little here, which you can do by holding Shift and Control and just dragging up and down. I can also quickly change the values here using the brush options. I need to start painting. Now at the top of this modifier I've got a mesh smooth. Now the reason for that is, quite often when you're working on terrain, your characters will fall down and get stuck in gaps. And by working on a half resolution and putting a mesh smooth set to 1 over the top, you're actually rounding off the corners, so you're giving your characters a chance to purchase and roll their feet across the surface. So this is obviously a bit hardcore, so let's just mellow that off a bit. Now, the cool thing about this is I can actually start painting. Let's just whack in a bit of mid-tone there, and just start painting a little bit of bump onto the surface there. I can start painting this layer, and then if I'm not happy with it, I can then go in and change it on a different layer. I'm literally not modifying the mesh directly, I'm simply just changing the vertex colors which are shaping the mesh. Now what that means is I can create a new layer and set that to vertex color, and then just drag that below the displace again, and now I can make changes. So let's put some white and start brushing down here. I'll set my opacity down a bit as well, so I'm not going too hardcore. And I can start raising up these corners here. Now because this is on a separate layer, this gives you the power of just toning that up and down. Now see, it's not affecting the layer below, so it allows you to do great little tweaks, and if it's a little too high, bring the whole lot down. Also erasing in various areas. Now you can do that with everything. You can just keep adding layers and layers and layers, and eventually crunch them down into one layer. Output that into your game engine if you wanted to. So it's not just a case of prototyping, this is actually a very valid way of doing level designs. So let's just put a bit of a trench in here. Perfect. Yep, happy with that? Good. Okay, so I've already started painting down some lighting on a separate vertex channel, which we can see now. So I've got some shadows put down, and I've also started putting in some flickering lights. Now the cool thing about vertex paint is you can actually animate the opacity. So You can see I've got some keys in here, and you can see the shadows and lights flickering around here. Hopefully the frame rate on Camtasia will be enough to show you this. So let's just get in closer and have a good look at that. See, my little torchy thing here is animated up and down. Great. And we'll just set the transparency to best. That crystal there. Yeah, so you can see we can do all sorts of little tricks with that. Now this is hardcore painted in, so if you can see on this particular pillar, it's getting a little yellow light spill from that light source, which is lighting up there, and it's casting a stronger shadow every time that light comes on, which is not a real effect, but in a game looks kind of cool. But if you look, I can rotate that around. It's not truly casting that light, it's just simply painted on. So we've got a bit of fake lighting in there, we have a bit of terrain sorted out, that's all very well and good. Let's put some objects scattered around the place. Now normally that would take a bit of time because you've got to kind of align them to the surface or use a plugin to put them in. But what we can use is the new reactor modifiers, well, modifiers, the actual functionality. Now I've put a plane underneath the surface, so if I drop anything through the floor, it will simply stop, and that allows me to stick things through the floor if I wanted to. And I've simply added a RB collection, rigid body collection, to which I've added these objects here. That's all I need to do. These are set to hang on, I'll just bring up the controls here. These are set to a mass of 1, so they have some mass. And all I need to do is grab these and place them over my scenery. I don't have to worry about exactly where, just as long as it's somewhere over the top. And we'll just drop them down a bit. Groovy. Okay, so let's just play that. Creating world, and we're in. Okay, so here's our scenery, and what we can just do is there's objects placed above. We're just going to hit play, and down they fall. Oof. Actually, haven't put a weight on these ones, so they're falling down there. Just throw that one away, don't want that one. So you can see the objects fall down quite nicely and settle and rock into their positions. Now this means you get natural junk falling around. Now if you don't like them where they are, you can just pick them up in real time, just throw them around a bit. I just want that kind of over there, that's it, they'll fall down there. I'll just toss that around a bit, and it kind of looks dumb there, let's just put that there. Throw these boxes over here, maybe even stack them a bit. There we go. Okay, so as we're happy with where those bits of junk have fallen, and we can just simply roll the camera around to move these objects, set to a particular area. We can simply go max, I'll wait till that one falls, stop, thank you, right, max, update max, and it goes back to max and repositions those objects to where they've fallen. There we are. So we've positioned those objects and we're happy. Now that's great if you're doing a game where like you're post-apocalyptic and you've got junk everywhere and you need to scatter things around, put down rocks, trees, whatever. Very quick, very simple. Okay, so we've done all this bit here, we'll just hide that selection, and we'll go on to the next section here. Now this is a little trick that I use a lot. I call this Modbox. A Modbox is basically something to hold a load of modifiers, which I can then drag and copy to other objects. Now I was rather fond of the old Doom editor back in the old days, which was essentially just a fake 3D editor. You had control over verts and splines, and essentially everything else was an extrusion up from there. Now for this particular level design we're going to use that same metaphor. So as you can see I've quickly drawn down some splines here. So now we want to give them some texture, weight and surface. To do that I'm using the new shell modifier, so I'll just turn that on now. And what that does is it simply extrudes up and thickens the object. Now in this particular case I'm using it to set it to exactly 256 or 128 in this case, which is a multiple of my texture map. Now one of the nice things about shell is it allows you to end that part of the stack with a selection. So I've got this one selecting the edges of my model. The reason I do that is then I can then tessellate just those sections. So the top's not tessellated, just the sides, and I could put more verts in if I needed to. I then have a mesh select over the top which deselects everything, and a UV map, a box UV map, which puts my texture coordinates on. Now because I've set it up that way, I can then go down to my line, make editable changes, and preview to the top of my stack. So as you can see, as I move this thing, the textures are sliding around, which means I know exactly how to line those up, so I've got perfect edges. Okay, so having done that, let's use the mod box. I'm going to go to Shell and select Tessellate, Mesh Select and UV. Right click and copy. Now what that allows me to do now is just go to any spline I like and just paste those modifiers down. And you can see it's dropped those walls in perfectly. Set up exactly the same. Now this is a very, very handy way of setting up your levels because it allows you to do all sorts of special effects and do it very quickly. Rather than having to select, for example, that vert, and that vert to pull them out, I just need to select the base vert, which I can do like so. Also, let me just pull that out. Also, the textures are sliding around just like in, say, a Quake editor or the Unreal editor. And that allows me to position my textures perfectly and keep a good texel density across my whole model, which is very important in games. In some earlier games you saw a lot of small textures on large objects and large textures on small objects, and you get this kind of awful kind of smeariness, whereas in games like, for example, Quake 3, which did it particularly well, you had even texel density across the whole scene and it looked great. What we can do here is use things like refine, just drop in extra points like so, and we can pull them out and start editing our level like so. Very quick, very simple. It's my mantra for this whole thing. In addition to this, we can use all the spline tools, for example refine. We can use, what else have we got here, which is good, fillet or chamfer. Let's just chamfer this edge and show you what it does. We can create sort of square edges or bring those edges in like so. Or we can use something like fillet or fillet to create these beautiful rounded edges like so. So it allows us to make a level very quickly with a spline from a top-down map or even imported splines. And then we can go in and clean up and start whacking details in to make a rather nice refined level. The cool thing about doing it with this way as well is that you can do little tricks like change your interpolation. Now if you change your interpolation, it cuts your polygon count down, bump, 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 without losing any data. What that means is that if you're doing like multiple platforms, you can bring up down the polys on your level with a few clicks rather than having to do a lot of work optimizing. So yeah, very cool, very handy, very quick, very simple, as we said. So let's just put these ones on here and set these up, and yeah, we'll just turn this modifier on and turn this modifier on. Now with this one here, I've used the shell modifier a little more, and I've done so by selecting a beveled edge. So I've clicked this and select bevel spline. Now by doing so, it allows me to take the spline here and edit it to change the profile of this column's base. If the art director doesn't like the shape I've made, a couple of clicks and I've got a better one. In addition, I've used volume select here and FFDs to make it so that I can change the number of segments in my pillars, and they keep the same sort of shape. That means if I use vertex lighting later, I might want to change the vertex count. So it's a nice procedural way of doing a pillar. Okay, all that aside, let's do a bit more. So, done a bit of modelling, quite happy with my level. Let's just select my vert select here, yep, and hide unselected. Now by doing so, I've gotten rid of all the superfluous objects around my scene, so I've got a nice clean dungeon scene essentially here. Now I've already set my level up and got it nicely divided up, and I'm just going to turn off my edged faces now and hit J on my keyboard to get rid of those squares around there, the selection brackets. Now what I can do is add a little scenery lights to make this more interesting. So we're going to hit a vertex paint modifier over the whole lot, and then we're going to slide this down to assign vertex colors, and then we're going to use calculate shadows. Everything else is pretty much fine, so we'll just hit assign, watch it render. Now what it's doing is taking the lights that I've already placed in the scene and applying the shadow maps and assigning that to the vertex colors. As we saw before in the earlier part of the demo, you can create various layers of your vertex paints, and that allows you to make various tuning and tweaks to each layer, and that can be very handy. A good example of this, for example, is if you're doing multi-platform work, which a lot of studios are. you can set your vertex colors up to work on one platform, and then, for example, if you're moving to, say, NTSC TV, which has a much stronger red channel, you can dampen down the red so you don't get so much screen glare. So one of the problems working on multiple platforms is just having to go in and tweak all the colors all the time. So with the multiple layers, it makes for much better control. So you can see it's put down the shadows and done a fairly good job. Now you can see the jaggedy edges you get with vertex lighting. With the new 3ds Max painting tools, we can actually soften this down in one go using a blur modifier, like so, and you can see it's softened it down a great deal. Now that's actually produced too weak an effect for me, so what I'm going to do is actually just create a new layer here, and I can use my brush tool to actually just lay down a little more black, and again soften that a little bit, a little more, and soften that a little bit. Yeah, perfect. So you can go in and manually tweak everything. In addition, you could add, say, a vertex color layer and start painting in things like moss or dirt. You just paint that into the corner here. Now, you don't have to be stuck with just using a standard vertex color blend. You've also got all these sort of blend modes, very much like the brush modes you see in, say, a painting program. So we can multiply and get like really dirty looking effects, or lighten to put like highlights or stained glass window effects in. And this is a very quick, very simple way of working. Now, you'd actually have to put a shader together to render this. You can render vertex lighting, or you can get something that's similar. But we really want exactly what we got on this vertex on the display viewport. And so, in order to do that, I'm going to render my scene out using render make preview, and set it. Animation make preview, and that will produce an absolute pixel for pixel perfect version of my scene. In this Camtasia, we'll be looking at the way particle flow can be used to test out your special effects and try out a few things before you actually sit down to write the code for your particle system. In this particular case here, we've used a particle flow attached to the character's hand, and if I just go into particle view, I can show you the setup. Now, particle flow is very powerful, and I'm not a programmer by any standards, but it didn't take me too long, probably around about half an hour, to set up this very complex sort of chain. Now, all this does here is creates a number of objects, instance the objects, and changes the collision of the objects to the floor and the walls, and produces some crack particles and some sparks and stones, and then eventually destroys those objects, very much like you'd do in a game with, say, a cyclic database, so we don't overflow the memory with too many objects and scene. So what we're going to do is just play what we've got so far, and you'll see that the character casts a spell, and out comes a throwing star. Now that wasn't very impressive at all. I mean, there was no whiz bang or anything wonderful like that. Just a star came out. So let's get rid of that and do something a bit more impressive. Let's make her summon several throwing stars. So let's just go to our birth number here, and we'll change the number to, say, 6. And then what we'll do is we'll make it so that she has a sort of a special magical glow. So we're going to drag in a spawn object that I've already dragged in and named. So I've renamed everything here to make it a little easier for me to find things. And this is simply just spawns one object, and its scale is 100, and it has a divergence of 20. So just bring that in, and we're going to drag the wire up to some objects that I've already made. And these are just shape-facing particles, and we're going to make it change its scale, and change the glow, and eventually delete the glows. Let's have a look at that effect now. Okay, so I'll just stop it here. Because the Camtasia is running a bit slow, it's very hard to see what's going on there. There's a large amount of particles, and they're being affected by force and wind. And these are facing particles, and then they start to spin away and change colour. So this is simply just, I'll just put on edge faces so you can see what's going on here. It's just spawning some flat particles here. Okay, so she's casting a spell, and it's teleporting in some shuriken, which go flying across the room and embed in the floor. As you can see, as they embed in the floor, they're creating crack marks, which are just textures, and throwing away sparks all over the place and rocks. Now, the nice thing about all this is I've actually made them hunt this target here. So if I pull this up, I'm just going to wall coordinates to do so. If I pull this up towards the wall, for example, and hit play again, the shuriken will instead fly across the room and embed in the wall. I think they're going to make it. Yeah, they're going to make it. Boom, just. And you can see the sparks and cracks on the wall there. Now, just to show this is truly dynamic, what we can do is grab this wall here and start to shift it. Now, while I'm doing Camtasia, this will run really slow, but most of the time it's actually quite fast. And as you can see, the shurikens skidding up that wall and enjoying themselves. And we can grab this and pull this down, and you can see that the shuriken slide across the floor as they hit different areas. Okay, so that's all fun. I'll just run it back to frame 0. On frame 0, it recalculates a lot faster, so you can tweak these things in real time. And we'll just undo that move. Get that wall back into its position. Okay, so let's do a few more things here. What we're going to do is bring out a character. So let's just say, bring out this little character here. And this is a bad guy that we're going to be using later in the demo. What I've done is built a simple box around him, which is a bounding box, very much like a standard game bounding box. And I'm going to add that in as a deflector. So we'll bring up a particle view again, and we're going to say if collide with chest box. Now again, this is just a rename, it's simply just a collision. So we'll just drag this in, and I'll get rid of these two handles here, we don't need those anymore. And we'll just drag this system all the way out here to where I have something special waiting for my little monster. Now over here I've got something that simply swaps particles for blood, and I've made some blood sprays and I've made a blood mist. I've linked these all together and I've got them splattering on the wall here and splattering on the floor. I'll just turn that one on. And finally, once the blood splatters on the floor, it eventually scales down after a certain amount of time and then is deleted. So this works very much like blood in most games. So what this allows me to do, I'll just link these up here, is if a shuriken hits one of the bounding box, I don't know how well I've aimed this thing, let's have a look. Looks like I've missed it. Oh no, I've got it, just got in there. It starts spraying blood out. And we'll just advance the frame a few. And you can see the blood sprays fall down. They're affected by gravity and wind. And as they hit the floor, they spawn splats. I'm just going through this step by step so you can see it on the Camtasia. Those splats streak and scale, and then eventually start to scale down. He has got a lot of blood coming out, actually. They start to slide down, and finally they dry out. Oh, it's not liking the frame rate running Camtasia at the same time. Okay, so let's just wind this back to frame 0, and this time we're going to move the target up a bit, so we're going to hit him a bit more. And to make it more interesting, we'll grab that wall and move it forward so it's right behind him. And we'll see how this works. There you go. Now this is the beauty of doing a visual prototype in Max, is the fact you can just play and play and play. You can work out scales and timing and delays, and all these sort of things, and see it in real time. There we have blood all over the walls. Fantastic. Oh, actually, let's just finish this off with a little detail here. And that is to take our little character here and turn on a vertex paint. So now let's have a look if vertex paint blood splattering on the character looks any good. You've got to be kind of morbid to work in games, I think. There we go. And there's our final result. Are we happy with it? We don't know. We'll put it to the board and find out. In this demo we're going to be looking at Character Studio 4's Motion Mixer, which is a very powerful tool for creating prototypes. Now one of the earlier reasons why we didn't do full motion prototypes for the entire game sequences was it just took too long to keyframe, and at the end of the day, if you weren't happy with it, you couldn't go back and polish it really. It was just too much work. Motion Mixer makes it completely effortless, so let's take a look at how we can use it. Here I have a little monster I've rigged up, and I've put him on a biped, and to control him we're going to be using an older game technique where we make the character move on the spot and then move them along a path by an arbitrary amount. So what I've already done is set up this spline object here, which is it's just got the character's name as a text object, a circle and a triangle. The triangle helps me know which way around the character is pointing. I've also set up a spline here as a path, and I've already connected the two with a path controller. So you can see I can slide the character along the path using the path controller. Now, one of the nice little hidden features is you can actually manually slide a character along a path nowadays. So that's kind of cool. Anyway, let's go back to the Motion Mixer. I'm going to start by loading up some clips into here. So that will be part one. So first we need to set our transition track up and turn this to a layer track. Now in transition track mode, you bring in several clips and you get transitions between them. Now we want this to pop between animation to animation. We don't actually want any transitions at all. So we're going to convert this to a layer track. That gets rid of that problem. So now we can bring in some clips from File, and I'm going to bring in a walk cycle for the character. Now here's my single walk cycle, and let's just zoom into about here. And what we're going to do is make the character walk 2 paces forward in this particular demo. So first I'll shift clone this to create a new one, and then slide it back. Oops. Having let go of the original, slide it back to match, and we'll just zoom extents there. See, we've got a nice trim between the two. Great. Now you'll be able to see that the character is now walking on the spot. Now in this file here, we've already key pathed from here to here, and so we know that at the end of this animation here, he's got to the end of his walk cycle. The problem is the feet are sliding quite badly, as you can see. So the trick here is to very early on work out the distance that the character moves, and the way we do that is by eyeballing. Let's say let's eyeball this back foot here. It's just past the halfway line there, so let's just move him to where his foot slides to the back, and then we can just simply move this vertex to that position. So just move it so his foot goes to about the halfway mark there. And we should get something that's more or less okay, as long as my animation's alright. Now I'm quite happy if it's not quite right in this case, because I want something that's believable. There we go. Great. So that's how we get the basics of the animation going. Now we can simply refine the vertex path to create new details, such as turning the character, and so forth. Now remember, we want to keep it around about 5 each time, so around about 5, and that gives us our control over our characters. So let's look at the next step. If you've had any problems up to this stage, you can simply jump to step 2 file. Now, in this particular file here, we've already done our loop and set up our spline. What we need to do now is add a track group. So we're going to actually click on the Kindiwara and add a track group here. Now this will allow us to add a recoil or a character getting punched or hit animation and blend it over the top. Also we can make the character cast spells. Now the way we're going to do this is we're going to set up this track so it only affects the upper body, and the way we do this is by clicking here and going filter, and here's our diagram of our character. We're just going to say none, and then we're going to select the spine and the arms, the head and the ponytail. That should do the trick. Now that will mean that the walk cycle, the character will keep walking and he'll turn, but the upper body control is entirely ours. Okay, so in this track group here we're going to add a new clip from File, and this one here is going to be from another character. We're just going to try it out in this character in this particular demo. So we're going to load up E-Missile and have a look at that. You see it's for the elf character. She's casting a sort of a spell with her hand, a magic missile. Open, and we'll play this animation here. Now the character, you can see, throws his hand forward and casts a spell and then goes back to his walk cycle. Now to give it a bit more interest here, what we can do is also add recoils, like if a character is being punched or hit. So I'm going to add another track group for that, so we have 3 tracks. One for special effects, one for walk cycles, and this one up here is going to be for recoils. So I'll just set the filter in this one. Again, I just want the upper body, so I'll just grab that now. Okay. And in this one here, I'm going to bring in wrong button. from File and bring in a recoil animation, which is kin hit. Okay. Now this allows me to play an animation, have a character cast a spell, but then get, say, hit by an arrow or something at the same time. So I can get very complex layers of animation going on all at once. In this particular hit, I think the recoil is a little strong. So what this is going to allow me to do is, by using the rubber bands, is I can quickly add in a fade out, fade in, fade out sort of an effect. Just grab that handle there and pull it down, and grab this one and pull it down. But it also allows me to check and see how my recoil is and soften it. So let's just see, he's bent over quite harshly there, we don't want it that harsh, so we can bring these points down until he's quite reasonable. That's not too bad there. That means you can animate over the top animations and then tone them down and then collapse them. Another very, very handy aspect. Also, I noticed the recoil is taking a bit long for my liking, so I can simply just compress the animation. So it's like nice punchy sort of boof sort of hit. So there we go, that's fantastic. Now the last thing to remain is I want to clean this up so I don't get disorientated with anything else. So I'm going to change the track colour to yellow. And that allows me to sync up with this yellow spline here. Just make that a bit stronger. There we go. So now we have a yellow biped, yellow spline, yellow markings. So it's all very easy to keep track of when I start adding lots of characters, which I'll do in the next Camtasia. So here we've come full circle and we're back at the start where we produced the game demo by using the capture screen functions in Max. Now here we've got the raw bipeds underneath the surface and a few control splines and objects that I've set up to finish off the picture. So here we have 3 monsters and the main character. Now we'll bring up Motion Mixer and you can see that I've created 4 sets of tracks with damage, and I've also simply color-coded them to match the splines that are controlling the characters. This took about an hour to put together and was great fun, and I'm so tempted to go ahead and just make a good 20 minutes of animation here, but this will do for now. I think this basically will sell the product. Essentially we've got is a Diablo-esque interface with manga-y, cartoony sort of characters, and you can see the character has the ability to jump and have airborne combat. So that really helps sell the idea. Had I come to someone and actually pitched that idea, they probably wouldn't have gone for it. But with something like this, the job of selling it would be much easier. Also, during this process, I've learned a few things about how my interface is going to work, the sort of distances and spaces that my creatures require to walk around. I've worked out my height, scale, what sort of scenery I'll need and how that will work, and also my general animation systems. Also, I started playing with a few special effects, and I'll show you those off in just a moment. So let's actually have a look at the structures I've added here. For example, let's look at this mouse pointer. Now this is just a Max Mesh object, and what I've done is placed a motion capture controller on it. The reason for this is I want to add a little bit of realism. So the next part of this particular demo, incidentally, will not function with Camtasia Recorder running. The frame rate is just too low for Max to motion capture. So in this demo here, what I'd like you to do is go to motion capture and show off test and how you can move the mouse cursor around with your mouse cursor, and it simply moves horizontally between the character and this dummy here. This dummy is essentially where she's looking. So in your particular version, hit start and record the mouse cursor moving backwards and forwards, and then you'll see a beautiful set of keys, and the audience can see how that adds sort of a realism to the interface. Okay, so I'm just going to have to bypass this section because, again, my frame rate is too low, and we'll have a look at a few extra effects. So this is set up so that the game camera is linked to the center of mass of the character, but this does not inherit the character's main jumping scale, main position, so that she can jump and the object stays put. Now the reason I've separated the two is so that I can make the camera shake if I wanted to by animating this spline here. Okay, so that's the basic setup. Let's have a look at the end result. So let's just unhide all, and finally let's just hide the bipeds. So if you go to here, it should see hide all. Select that and hide. So here's the end result. Now I've added a few special effects in here. For example, I've added a red trail to this character's sword using the Motion Trails plugin by Bytegeist. It's very nifty and great for producing Soul Calibur sort of sword effects. In addition to this, every time the character jumps, I've added a little cone and put some transparency on it, so that when she jumps, I'll just go to that frame, you can see a sort of a soft, dusty ring effect happening. And this is great because it allows you to tune and test your bitmaps. Okay, so there we are. That's the demo done, and I've got something here that I can take off and help sell my product, and I've learned a lot about my game design on the way. Thank you very much.